Why does China want to hide Tiananmen Square? A fruit seller in Tunisia committed suicide publicly after he was repeatedly harassed by police and government employees to sell his fruit. This simple act created a massive protest not just in Tunisia, but in entire Arab world. What we now call as Arab Spring oppressive regime are very careful about such incidents, as they can create a huge wave just like Hunger Games shows. Chinese here. The fundamental reason is that it delegitimizes the ruling party. CCP has always promoted itself as always representing the ultimate welfare and interests of its people. Bloodshed like this directly contradicts such claim. China doesn't have multi-party politics or even a real election, so the party needs to maintain its benevolent image and flawless history to justify its perpetual governance. Other comments mentioned that allowing discussion of Tiananmen can lead to mass unrest. While this might be true in early years, I don't think it's the main reason for the censorship up to today. The actual reality is, many people already know about the incident, and the vast majority won't do anything over a political crackdown from 36 years ago, as they have other priorities to care about in their lives. Because CCP doesn't want the Chinese population to know anything bad about the party, I can provide some non-biased perspective on this, as I have some knowledge on Chinese history. Some have mentioned that one-party states prioritizes stability, and any form of dissent, if not handled properly, can quickly boil over, as there are limited outlets for venting in an autocracy. It's almost like if a crack were to form on a pressurized vessel, it would blow. If you think Arab Spring is bad, keep in mind that China has a population of more than 1 billion. If things go out of control, it can really get out of control, as we have seen many times in Chinese history stretching back all the way to antiquity. In China, any discussion on matters like Tiananmen could quickly form it into something wider, i.e. cracks, which could destabilize the country. There have been instances where this has happened. A simple Google will show you. Hence, to prevent this risk, they simply do not let people talk about it. Because didn't quite go the way that the West likes to frame it. Chinese students actually hung and burned a ton of Chinese soldiers and destroyed numerous tanks and military vehicles. It was not quite the massacre that Western governments would have you believe, though it was brutal nonetheless. Don't get me wrong, it was still a massacre, but it wasn't as one-sided as we are led to believe in the West. The West doesn't like us seeing civilians successfully fighting off and massacring the military, and the event is embarrassing for China, so they don't want people to know either. There were pictures of what actually happened floating around in a sub the other week. You'll see if I can find them and edit with a link. Edit. Found them. Warning, very NSFW. The burned bodies are CCP soldiers, HTTPS. People in China do know about it. They just have a different version than the one we hear about. Some pointers to your post. 1. They see it as violent riots, not people being killed for protesting. 2. China and the people living there do see themselves as a democracy. 3. Around here we love to exaggerate the events to paint them as evil. At the same time, we like to pretend we're a force of good for this world. It's all part of a political game. They don't hide it. Chinese people learn about it in school. These comments are just made by Americans that always believe they know everything about the world. China hides Tiananmen Square to control the narrative and maintain political stability, acknowledging it could challenge their authority. Honest answer, because any Westerner who asks is never just asking the question, and would subsequently be happy enough to ignore and cover for any bad thing their own government has done. I'm not defending the party here, but most Western approaches to that topic is like, since we'd obviously never do anything like that. They don't really try to cover it up as much as we're told in the West. Everyone in China knows about Tiananmen Square. Normally, the CCP does not attempt to hide or cover up historical events that much as to totally deny something happened. They usually try to soften or distract. Namely, Mao's Great Famine and Cultural Revolution are not exactly censored, or any actions by the Gang of Four. The reason being is that they can point to that era as being early CCP, as in an entirely different party really. Most of the modern CCP's top brass are actually victims of Mao's persecution. Xi was one of those exiled to the countryside, for instance. Tiananmen Square is different. It was not the conservative faction, but rather the liberal reformist faction led by Deng Xiaoping. Anything that happened was also in reactionary response to Deng. Now that's a problem. The party line has pretty much always been after Deng everything was fine, but that specific incident, even though it wasn't too big of an incident in the first place, points out a flaw in that train of thought, and that is unacceptable. Also, just FYI, Tiananmen Square had jack shit to do with liberal democracy. It was mostly in fighting between reformist and conservatives, the conservative supporters of Maoism being the protesters. Same reason America wants to hide all the stuff they've done. It makes them look bad. The Chinese dogma has been to scrub unauthorized information when things happen, so only the official and authorized narrative exists afterwards. I'm pretty sure it's one fairly visible case in a long list of suppressed bits of information. The problem isn't the event itself, but the story behind the protest. Remember when USSR decided to liberalize and got completely destroyed? Well, China did the same. The big difference is the party was cautious enough to avoid the crisis at the last moment. When they saw where it was going, they hastily returned to good old communism, worked on it during a few years, then did a second liberalization, which worked this time. Tiananmen manifestation happened in the middle of this fail. It's not a China kill protesters moment. It's a Chinese government fucked so much people went protesting despite risk of death moment. Damn, listen, the state is your friend. The state is there to guide and protect you. The state will not hurt you. Pay no mind to those noises behind the curtain. The state has let you travel to other cities now. The state has imported goods for your enjoyment. Do not wonder where those people went. That is how it works. Meeting students with bullets and tanks makes the CCP look weak. It shows that the students' voices were a threat to their rule, and requiring that much force to stop them looks desperate. Also, from a diplomacy perspective, reminding your population that you will kill them if they speak out is not conducive to a good reputation. For the same reason American schools don't teach about the Haymarket Affair, or the MOVE bombing in Philadelphia in the 1980s. Americans love to think only China does this shit lol. The incumbent government wants to rewrite history, or at least wants to try. Just like the J6 insurrection.